So when you clicked on this video, you probably thought from the thumbnail and title I was maybe gonna denounce using pedals and pedal boards. And that's not true at all. I love conventional pedals, pedal boards of any shape and size, but I stopped building my own because inevitably, whenever I took my board that I made to the gig, something would go wrong. Patch cable I made was faulty, or maybe I had some issues with Velcro. And when you're playing in front of tens, hundreds, or thousands of people, you have to have the confidence in your gear when you put it on stage and you plug it in that it's bulletproof and it's gonna work. So when I started touring with artists out of Nashville, I knew I needed a pedal board professionally built. More importantly, one that could handle the rigors of the road, going in and out of tour buses, airplanes, being handled by stagehands, and any other thing you can imagine that could happen to your gear. So I sought out the folks at Xact Tone Solutions, and they're Nashville's premier rig builders. They build all sorts of pedal boards and rigs for Nashville's busiest and best musicians. XTS has been making boards for me for about 10 years or so, and for this new build and this new musical project I'm doing, I was like, let's design a board and document the whole process. You're not just dropping your pedals off in a box and giving it to them and out comes a pedal board. There's a whole process of consultation that they'll do with you. They'll talk about any custom fabrication or mods that you might want. It's a really beautiful work of art that they do, frankly, to pedal boards, and I wanted to show you pretty much from top to bottom how they're doing it. So we're going to talk about the entire process. We'll have some great time-lapse footage, and we'll talk to the folks that are actually doing the work. This video isn't sponsored by anyone. I paid for every penny of the work that went into that great pedal board. It's more of my gift to XTS. They've done so much work for me over the years, and I think the masses really need to see how special all these guys are that build these products. So if you're interested in, having a custom pedal board like this, watch this video. It's going to be long and there's going to be a lot of information, but I think it's really going to shine a light on some of the folks that help Nashville's best players get the sounds they get. And something I don't normally do is try to get out in front of the comments. I encourage you to leave them, but I know I'm gonna hear, what do you need all that stuff for? Just plug straight into the amp. A real guitar player wouldn't need all those pedals. Must be nice to have all that expensive gear. And yeah, it is, because I've been a professional musician for over 25 years, and anybody on the other side of this camera, in your profession, you probably want the best equipment you can get. I don't care if you're in lawn care or construction, you want good tools, and that's what this stuff is. How did I get it? Well, I saved my money. I invested and reinvested. I trade. I sell used stuff all the time. And for the hobbyists, it's no different from someone that's really into great golf equipment, fishing equipment, cars, watches, knives, you name it. If you want to spend your money on good stuff that makes you happy, freaking go for it, man. Don't let anybody tell you how to spend money on your happiness. But if your happiness connects to a professionally built pedal board, I hope that maybe after this video, you'll consider working with XTS to get the rig of your dreams built. So this board started as a simple Pedaltrain Novo 24 board. Now, I've been using Pedaltrain boards for many years. They're inexpensive, lightweight, fairly rugged, and they have the nice slight angle that I enjoy too. They're not a flat board that I feel is a little bit trickier to navigate for me personally. Now, this is also the first time ever I built a pedal board with a loop switcher, and I decided to go with the GigRig QMX6. Now, if you know anything about the GigRig company and Dan from that pedal show, he's like the brains behind the company. They make great stuff, and Barry and Eric are gonna give us their thoughts on both the pedal board, the switcher, and how they modify the pedal board, because if you can see, there's no slats on it like a normal Pedaltrain board. This is a really cool thing that they do, and I have some really fun footage of that process as well.
A potential drawback of using these is these slats can kind of be dictatorial as to where you can put stuff. So if you imagine like an EP booster, if you put it right here, it's only going to be like part way on that. And so what we'll do, and you guys have probably seen us do before, is we'll put a laminate top that Eric makes in the wood shop back there, which is a piece of 1/4-inch ply with black laminate on it that he'll screw down to the perimeter, and then that lets us put anything wherever we want, pedals and cable runs and things like that. So you're not having to, I got a sneak cable, it can only go right here. or everything's got to kind of duck down. We can do sort of the way we do it with our flat boards, which are those just aluminum rimmed, no place to hide anything underneath. But this sort of splits the difference between those.
Right, and what I like about it is we can still hide the power supply underneath it and give us all that surface area. So I'm not losing any space by putting a power supply here.
Right.
I can still move under there.
Yeah,
and they'll make sure it's mounted. I mean, the reason I come to these guys is because you can throw this thing when it's done out the back of a truck, and 99% of the time the pedals will still be intact. Yeah. I know you guys won't sign off.
Yeah, we don't enjoy throwing it. We don't. That is probably void.
You can throw it out of a van.
Yeah,
a minivan or something.
Yeah, something not as
Corolla.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's funny. People will say, loop switchers, they up reliability. It's going to make, if a pedal goes down or whatever. But the stuff,
signal path.
Yeah. Well, the stuff that, as far as reliability goes, the stuff that goes down on a pedal are jacks and foot switches.
Right.
And what is a foot switcher but just a collection of jacks and foot switches? So if you're talking about having, reliability issues, this is a great unit. It's not prone to failure at all, but it's more stuff. So I think as far as a use case for it, or it sort of being on trial for its life and being chosen anyway, you kind of have to know why. I think one of the biggest reasons is workflow.
Right.
So you can look down and kind of see at a moment's notice, like which of these lights are on, right? I can see that this one is on and this one's on, and kind of survey your kingdom in one shot.
Exactly.
And everything is in one spot. So if you're doing, your solo stuff, you're not having to sweep a whole board, but it's just right here. And you're like, okay, here. Or if you're sideways and you don't know what's going on, you can look down and be like, oh crap, I left that on.
Exactly.
Or I misstruck that or whatever.
Right.
And these foot switches, I think they call them OptiKick. These are super reliable. We've never had one fail on these, and this is like one of the smallest form factors.
Sure. So the first pedal in the chain here is the Schaffer Replica Storm. Now, the Schaffer Replica draws inspiration from the Schaffer Vega diversity system created by Ken Schaffer in 1975. The Model X10 receiver and 63X transmitter was the first wireless unit really adopted by the major rock acts of the day. I mean, it was used by the Stones, Pink Floyd, AC/DC, and I think Van Halen even used it, but there were others too. Most famously, Angus Young would use a Schaffer box to hit the front of his Marshalls in the studio. I mean, I can't think of using a wireless unit in the studio, but stories go that that's what he did, and that's how the Marshall sound he got was maybe a little bit different than just plugging into the front of the amp. So in about 2015, this company called Solo Dallas took the audio section of the Schaffer Vega diversity system and put it in some different products. They make standalone pedals, and they also make a really cool tower recreation. So this is pretty much the rig I've been using for my gigs here in Nashville, my old 335 and a 2-Rock TS1 with a 112 cabinet, but I'm not using the cabinet in this room. I'm going direct to my aux box, so it's easier to record and keep, the volume really controlled. So great clean sound. Now the Schaffer Replica, if I kick it in, I made it kind of obvious. You'll really hear a boost. Really, really great clean boost. It brings everything forward, and I have it turned up a little bit for the video purposes, but it feels good. It sounds like my clean sound just got louder with not being too adulterated. So those old wireless units had some limiting in them, not so much compression. You can feel it compressing a little bit when I turn this limiter knob up, but it's very, very subtle, but feels really good live. You can kind of tell when I smirk a little bit because I'm like, shit, that sounds good. And if you wanted to kind of drive the front end of the amp, you could do that. But but still, it's not hitting it hard enough to really drive it into overdrive. You could push it pretty well if you wanted to, and if you turn that limiter up, it will start to compress a little bit. But you barely notice it. And it's a fun option for a clean boost. And if you want to get a little bit of a, some always on compression to make your whole sound even. I don't use it that way that much. I just use it as a little bit of a clean boost and to bring all of my frequencies forward. But a really cool pedal, and one that I always wanted to add to a board. So thanks Solo Dallas for making something pretty cool that is pedal board size and works really well. So from out of the Schaffer Replica, I'm going to go directly into the volume pedal, and this is a Lehle Mono Volume S model. It's a little bit smaller footprint than their other volume pedals. I've been using these for a while now. They're super roadworthy, never had one go down. Barry and Eric will talk about that as well. And for the tuner, this is a Peterson. This is one of their mini Strobe pedals. I've been waiting for years for them to put this out, and that's tapping directly off of the volume pedal. So I just have it on, and then I'll pull the volume pedal back and then tune, and boom, there I go, silent tuning. I like that because I don't like to switch on the tuner. It's one extra step. I just kind of pull this back, tune, and I'm ready to go. You guys actually recommended it to me because you said you had a 0% fail rate.
Yeah, when a volume pedal breaks, I bring it in and I say, and if it's an Ernie ball, I tentatively say, will you please fix this, or at least give me 30 seconds to get out of the room before you throw it out the door?
I look forward. I just did 4 of them for Chris Lusinger, so I've cracked the code on changing the strings.
So if you need your string changed,
don't come here. I'm really good at doing them now.
But buy a new one.
These are great because there's no string. If they break, you're not going to fix it, so just throw it away. You're not going to be tempted
there's no way.
Repair it. I mean, you can send it back to Lehle.
I'm sure they will take care of it.
They're great. They're smooth. They feel maybe not as good as an Ernie ball.
Yeah, I love the way an Ernie ball feels, but this works for me. As long as it's off in this position, not like some cheaper volume pedals where you're like gotta rock them.
Even an Ernie ball that's out of adjustment, you can heal and it's slightly open. I tell you, the hardest pedal to get off of is the Ernie ball. Like if you've become addicted to that draggy, long throw, it can be very hard to transition off.
And that's another thing, like in this consultation process, those questions come up and it's like, should I move on from this? I mean, there's a pedal shop right up the street where they said, hey, maybe you should go get this tap switch. I'll be like, okay. And I'll go and come back and boom, they added it to the board. So, and I don't think there's any you guys aren't doing any backdoor deals with
not that you know of.
I should also mention volume pedal placement. For the longest time, I've been actually a volume before drive pedal guy. A lot of folks will put the volume pedal after their drives and almost make it act like a master volume so they could have the full output of the pedal and then use the volume pedal as a master. That's totally cool and completely valid. But what I like to do is put it before the overdrive pedals because then I can kind of adjust the amount of gain going into the pedal and it gives me even more options if I want them. So I could have, an overdrive pedal really ripping, but I could pull it back a little bit and then use this as almost my foot switch to get more gain. So in this instance, I am volume pedal before drives. So this is the part of the board that starts to get a little wacky, kind of fun, and this was important to me because most pedal boards I had to make were for, accommodating artist gigs that I was on. And you don't always get to be yourself. You have to put things on there, like a plumber would or a construction worker. You got to have all the tools for the job. Now I can kind of put any wacky tool on there I want since I'm playing more of my music on my own gigs. And this Poly Blue Octave from MXR is a really cool pedal. I always liked octave pedals, but never really thought about putting one on a pedal board. This one sort of does that and a whole lot more. If you're familiar with the Electro-Harmonix POG, that gives you a lot of different octaves up and octave down, a couple different octaves of it actually. That has all of that on board here in the Poly Blue Octave. There's also fuzz built into that, some modulation, but I'm just using it for a simple octave below to give me a little bit more girth when I want it, you know, and pairing that with overdrive, which we can do at any point, will give me some different fun sounds. And it is polyphonic, so it does work for, you know, just more than single notes. It works for chords and that sort of thing. I won't probably use it for that very much, but it is a pretty cool pedal. And you can hear, like, you know, some different octaves. You can do a second octave down, so it gets really gnarly. And you can even change the mix of it here. If you want to put some octaves up with that, you can. Pretty fun. You can go even higher. I probably won't do that very much. You want to add some modulation. It's actually really fun. One of the things that the POG does is it gives you sort of that faux organ sound, and you can see that, or hear that we're actually starting to get that as well. Now, I do have another fuzz pedal both on the fuzz loop here, because I won't use them at the same time. I'd set one up for a particular song, turn that off, turn that on. If my fuzz is engaged, you'll hear it. And that is the Argo fuzz from Mythos. It's basically like their take on an Octavia style pedal. Now, the caveat here is that I probably will never use this on its own. I love to pair fuzz with overdrive. On its own, this is kind of what you can expect. You know, you got volume, fuzz, and then you have the blend of the octave, so you can bring that octave in to give you more of that Octavia type of sound. Again, not a sound I would probably use on its own. But with overdrive, it's really, really cool. And we can get to that later if we got time. I put these things they call wingmans on them so I could hit it with my foot, and I can decide if I want to turn that octave sound up. But Zach and the crew do a really good job of this stuff, and I have another Mythos pedal on here too. He's a good friend and makes really, really good stuff. He's very passionate, and it comes through in his builds. And if you ever want a kind of a gnarly sound down low, you can get that too. Also, too, if you have a question about buffers before the Argo, I asked Zach, and a buffer like the Schaffer Replica will be okay. More fuzz face style stuff, you don't want really anything before it. You want the guitar hitting the fuzz pedal. But if I'm in the heat of the moment playing a tune, I hit my switch one off right by my foot there. I'm singing the tune, boom, fuzz on, fuzz off, okay? So that's what's going on in loop one, and that's our first official loop in the switcher here. Basically what happens is we're gonna come out of this, and you start with your input on the switcher right here, and then whatever's in that loop is basically a send and return type of situation, and arm and fire, ready to go. So lots more that we're going to talk about. Let's talk about some overdrives. This is where it gets fun also. So we're moving on to the drive section here, and in the next loop is the Vemuram Budi G. Now, the Budi G is a clean boost and a light gain overdrive in one. You could turn the drive down and make it a total clean boost. There is a nice amount of overdrive in that pedal, and when it comes to Vemuram stuff, I'm going to be honest, I tried many of their pedals, which were all great. They just weren't working for me in the way that I wanted them to. When I got this one, I was like, okay, this is one I can work into the rig, and it sounds really, really good. You see the levels just up slightly at around 10 o'clock, and the gain is at noon. There's even a little sort of set screw on top of the pedal to dial in more saturation if you want. So I'm here with my clean sound. I hit number 2, and I get a little bit of breakup from it. And I like when I can do that. Just a little bit of sort of faux amp breakup. Great sounding pedal. It's got some more gain on tap if you want it. That's the first time I did it during this little setup here I got. That sounds really good. Really, really nice sounding, and you know, just simple sort of treble and bass controls on there, and of course, the big red knob is your output control. Great pedal, Budi G. Works great for this rig. I've been very, very happy with it. Now, back to the Mythos stuff. This is the Herculean Deluxe Overdrive, and I did a really fun live stream with Xact from Mythos on this, and I claim that I'm done buying overdrive pedals because he put in two of my favorite sounds. In this side, he is using a circuit that's very blues breaker-ish with his tweaks. And then in this side, because it is a double pedal, it is sort of Zen Drive inspired, so we're getting more saturation. Between those two pedals, I got all the drive I need. I got plenty on board. And that's in switch number 3. And you can see everything's on and it's engaged when I hit that switcher. The reason I wanted this closer is because if I need to access the second foot switch, I can. But that pedal, man, it's a really fun overdrive pedal. And you're gonna say, well, that sounds pretty much like the Vemuram. Vemuram, of course, because there'll be a moment where I'm playing the booty, and I want a little bit more, but I want it to sound similar. So now I'm in like really, really nice lead land. So if I'm there, I'm good. I can step on either one. I can add them and stack them. I'm a stacker, and it sounds to me like what I'm really searching for. Now, if the booty's off, and I'm still kind of digging that, and I got to bring the big rock, let's turn that on. A lot more saturation, and you can see the drive is down pretty low. I'll probably not go that far, but you can hear even these old microphonic pickups. If you're talking to them, you'll get something. Nerdy crap, yeah. But if I want it, it's there, and I like that. I like having the ability to go anywhere I want to with a pedal like that. So the Herc Deluxe is in 3, Budi's in 2. That's my drive section. So I'm really just going back and forth between those quite a bit when I'm playing live, because you just never know what you're going to get, particularly in the way I play, which is from a very improvised place. I don't have songs that need certain sounds. I'm always sort of making on-the-fly decisions, and that really helps. So as I move on down the line in switch number 4, I ganged up a couple modulation pedals, the Keeley Rotosonic and the old Boss TR2. I can't get away from that great tremolo that they've been making for years. Now, when it comes to rotary speaker sounds, in a small package, the Rotosonic's the best I've found. Now, that's a custom shop model that I got on Reverb, and they don't, I think, add it to their normal product line, so you gotta go hunting if you want that pedal. It also does a great univibe and vibrato as well, but I love it for a rotary speaker sound. I think it's killer. Yeah. I dig that a lot, and I'll pair it often with like the booty. I think it's great. Really, really great pedal. Then I'll never use that in the tremolo together. Probably never. So I'll just turn that off, and I know I can assign the trem and then turn on the mod, same thing. Now that one is the JHS modded version they did many, many years ago, where you could send your pedal in and have Josh and the crew mod it. And it's got a little wheel on the side here that is like a buffer, because sometimes tremolo pedals, you'll hear your signal dip a little bit. That helps you sort of even it out, or even boost if you want. And I did put a wingman on there too, so I could grab it with my foot and change the speeds, because I've never found a digital trem that I really liked. A digital trem may have a tap tempo function on it. They'll sound really good, but I just like a tremolo that's just kind of doing its own thing, and sometimes it surprises me where the rate's at, and I like that. So that's why I went with those two. But those are both assigned to the mod here, and I use those probably more than you'd think. Any time there's a part of the tune that needs some sustain, I'll throw this on, maybe kind of go Budi G's on. Just to add a little bit of motion. That's kind of how I love to use tremolo. I like it in a number of different ways, but in my situation, if the keyboard player is playing some piano that doesn't have a lot of sustain, I'll maybe put a tremolo on. If he goes to organ, I'll pull that stuff off and go back to clean guitar stuff. So I'm always making those decisions on the fly. That's what I love about this board, is I have a lot of options. The HX One I decided to add to this board because, it's good to have options, right? And this is actually one of my favorite pedals to come out in some time, because they made that M series of products, the M9, the M5 particularly, better. They made a smaller footprint, more rugged design, better switches. The functionality is really great. It's easy to program, and it's got a ton of stuff in it of all different flavors: drives, modulation, delays, reverbs, synth sounds. It does a lot of stuff, and I'm just using it right now as a slap echo, because I like to have a slap echo, and if I want to use other delay sounds that are more interesting, I can get those too, and we can hear some of those. But I always like to have a slap echo. So in number 5 is my HX One. So you're like, it's just doing a slap. But if I want to get some more delay sounds, I can. I could do just a simple 300 millisecond delay. So it's a little longer. Maybe I can turn a Herc on. So it's giving me a little depth, but not out of hand. I always like that 300 millisecond for just widening the delay a little bit. So let's take that off. We'll go here. It does some really fun modulation stuff. I love this retro reel sound. Really cool. Let's add some drive. So it's like that out of tune, vibrato tape saturation. Tape machine is what I'm looking for. Fun sounds like that, but I can get other delays. Oh, here's a really fun shimmery reverb. This is like if you want some big epic thing. Does a great job of that. There we go. Oh, here we go. What else we got? We got some other delays dialed in here. Oh, 500 milliseconds is another one of my favorites. Maybe I'll put the Budi on. So I can dial that stuff up pretty quickly. Just jump on that, back to my slap. I'm such a fan of slap echo. It sounds like you're in a small room. Really, really great stuff. So Line6 HX One, that's in number 5. A couple more things to talk about, and they're equally as fun. So I don't use delay a lot, and there's a reason for it, because I'm very picky about what delay pedals do. There's something that analog delay pedals do that I'm always in search of, and it's this sort of like swelling of sound underneath you. I associate it mostly with like the Deluxe Memory Man kind of sound, but I could never find one that like didn't really overwhelm my entire guitar sound until I found the Benson Delay. I played this at the Guitar Summit in Chicago that the Fretboard Journal helps to post. I met Chris Benson there, and I got to play this pedal. Actually, I didn't. I heard another guitar player play it, and I immediately was like, oh, that's it. And the way I have it set up is very, very subtle. You can get as wacky as you want with this, and I'm not going to twist the knobs all that much because I just want to show you what I do with it, and I also don't want to mess with the mojo of my settings. I'm a little superstitious with that. So I turn that on with number 6, and I just want this sort of swelling sound. And you can hear it repeating, but it doesn't get in the way. You know, so if I'm kind of going, you hear something happening, but you got to listen for it. I can even play some single notes, and it doesn't get too crazy. Now I do have drives going into it. I don't have it in the effects loop, and it still hangs. One of my musical guitar heroes is Daniel Lanois. He's a producer famously, but a really great sort of moody, atmospheric guitar player that really changed my perspective on playing and creating sounds. And when I heard him, I was always looking for that kind of sound so that if I wanted to get crazy, I could, and it wouldn't overwhelm me too much. Some delay pedals, no matter how hard you try, don't let you do that. The Benson does. It's a really, really great delay pedal. I'm totally smitten with it, and I had to add it to this board. You probably noticed that MXR Reverb pedal has been on the whole time, and that's true because that's where we're getting our reverb from. It's a great sounding reverb, and I'm just using the plate setting in it, although there's a lot more in there. I can't reach, it's too far away. But it's going into the loop of the TS1. Now, the TS1 doesn't have reverb on board, but it does have a tube buffered effects loop, which isn't something you see in a lot of amplifiers. Lots of times, amplifiers that have an effects loop will have a little solid state or like a MOSFET amplifier in there to keep the signal strong as it goes in and out of a loop through whatever kind of gear you're sending it through. It's a very, very cool feature of the TS1 and one of the things that makes those amplifiers special. Now, again, that's wired to an interface here on the board, and I can just send the I/O to that amplifier send and return. More on that later. Now, I just have a simple, kind of short reverb dialed up. But I have this expression pedal connected to it. So what I can do is I can go from dry to super wet. And I can do it on the fly or anywhere in between. And with it being in the loop, I can hit it with overdrive and it won't freak out and kind of give me too much reverb. Let's see here. If I want to give it even more. How about this? Now add some trem. Maybe a little bit of that fun delay. Fun stuff. Turn it all off. Boom. can do it pretty quickly. But that is a really fun feature of that MXR Reverb, where we can put an expression pedal into it and we can program it pretty quickly and pretty simply. Sometimes one of the cooler parts of an XTS pedalboard build isn't about what's happening on top, but about what's going on underneath, or in this case, on the side. This is a box that they build called the FlexiFace. This is a really cool little interface, and I plug my guitar in and then out to the amp there, and it's got a send and return for an effects loop. So I have my reverb pedal assigned to that effects loop. But what's cool is if I get into a situation where I'm playing an amp that doesn't have a loop, maybe it's a backline rental or an old Fender, I can still use the out and everything will be routed. There's switching jacks in here that determine whether I'm using the effects loop or not. It's a really, really cool feature. And since I'm using an amp with a 2-buffered great effects loop, I was like, let's take advantage of it and not let this reverb get too splashy when I start adding drives into it. It sounds really, really good. And I chose not to put the delays in the loop because I wanted them on the switcher, and I don't use a lot of delay, so it's not gonna get super washy if I send overdrives into it. But this is a great, great feature, and they do a lot of this stuff at XTS, and they're always designing smart ways to, get in and out of your board and circumvent any future problems that you might see down the road. So regardless of the style or size of pedal boards, you want to have good power making it run optimally. And there's a lot of great power supplies out there. I've used a ton of them, whether it's Voodoo Labs, True Tone, Shocks. They're all really, really good. I've kind of settled on the Strymon Zuma for my last few pedal boards. There's a lot of milliamps coming out of each one of these ports. So if I have a higher drawing pedal, like maybe one of the Universal Audio pedals that's 400 milliamps, I'm not going to run into any problems with an underpowered port. Now, there's a lot of pedals on here, and there's more than what this would supply, so I'm using the Ojai, which is their little extension box, so I'm totally covered on all these pedals getting the adequate power that they need. So yeah, make sure you really have solid power, and you can consult with Barry from XTS. He's great with this kind of stuff. He's going to be able to talk you through your power needs, whether it's in person or on the phone or email. So now that we've seen the board and we've gotten to hear all the pedals, let's take a look at how Eric builds the board from the ground up. Once again, here he is putting that black laminate top on top of the Novo 24 board from Pedaltrain. You can see that he's drilled 2 holes on the top of the board as well, and this is going to be helpful when he wants to route cables to the underside. He'll use those holes to run power and audio to wherever he needs to and keep the board looking clean. This is where Eric is going to mount the power supply on the underside of the board. Most power supplies these days come with some sort of mount or bracket for this application, and I really like the Strymon stuff because it fits like a glove. Next, Eric is going to head back into the shop and hit the drill press so that he can drill holes in the interface that's mounted on the side of the board. From that point, he's going to cut all of the wires to custom lengths and build the interface by hand. Regardless of how fast or slow we make the video, it's pretty obvious that Eric has spent a lot of time with a soldering iron in his hand. Now, this is one of my favorite things that Eric does, is he builds custom risers for pedals so that everything is at a height that's easy to reach. The risers alone were something that I didn't think of when building my own pedal board, and thankfully Eric and the crew, they think of the little things for you. And as many times as I've been to the XTS shop, I can tell you that that paintbrush for dusting is one of Eric's most used tools. Now, this is something that's really cool I haven't seen Barry or Eric do. Eric is actually going to heat up this putty knife with a heat gun so that he can scrape adhesive off the back of this Keeley pedal. He's doing this so that he can ensure a good connection between his 3M dual lock and the back of the pedal. That 3M dual lock needs a really strong surface to hold onto, so when you connect it to its counterpart on top of the board, you won't have any pedal slippage. One of the things that I always took for granted when building my board was distance between pedals. You can see that Eric is really making sure he's going to size things up before he commits to cable builds. You can also see that he's taking special care to make sure that no wires get crimped once the pedals are secured to the board. At this point, Eric is good to go and he's begun running audio to all of the cables. Keep in mind that all of these cables are custom made to order. You can bring in cables of your own and they can use it and help save on the cost a little bit, but 9 out of 10 times, I really like having Eric make everything to custom lengths. From this point, you can see that Eric is going to manage the underside of the pedal board and keep all of those power cables nice and neat. You can see that he's also running audio underneath the board as well, because we need to get from one side of the board to the other to connect to the FlexiFace. And one of these days, I'm gonna have to ask the guys how much solder they go through in a week. I imagine it's a lot. So at this point, Eric is in the home stretch. He can now start to put the pedals back on the board, wire them up to their custom lengths, and you can see that his work is impeccable. Once he gets to this point, it's pretty much just wiring things up and then making sure the pedals are secure on the board. He'll go through the entire board, test it, make sure everything that we planned on is working, and then they'll call me to pick it up. So hopefully by now you can see that a lot of effort, wisdom, knowledge, and care goes into building one of these custom pedal boards from XTS. And I always tell people that working with them is like an insurance policy. You're gonna pay for good work, but you always have an open line of communication to them for alterations, questions, adjustments, that sort of thing. Barry, Eric, and Greg, who you haven't met yet, are wonderful when it comes to really making sure that your needs are met regardless of where you're at on the road, in the studio, or at home. And you don't have to live in Nashville to have them build you a board. People from all over the world send them their gear to put together a custom rig. They'll even do Zoom consultations with you to make sure everyone's on the same page. So for a lot of us, this gear is our prized possessions, and if we're gonna box it up and send it to some people that are gonna put it all together, we wanna make sure it's in good hands and that they're gonna treat it as we would. So I thought, let's get to know Barry, Eric, and Greg from XTS. We'll learn about how Greg started the company and how Barry and Eric got into the fold and do what they do. I thought I'd put it at the end of the video here and you can come and revisit and get to know these guys because I just think they're awesome. They're incredibly smart and full of knowledge and want nothing more than to get you a great product out of their doors.
Xact Tone Solutions started well before it actually became a company, which was building rigs for my friends in like the Houston, Austin, and throughout Texas. Because I got into in the late 80s, early to mid 90s, the love for racks and rack gear and so forth. I had a friend of mine, John Ziegler, that lived in Houston. Great player, has been a great player in LA for years, but he was the one that had the first rack other than guys like Lukather and Landau and the guys in LA. So I was intrigued by that and learned how to do those, but also learned how to do pedal boards and so forth. And that's where it was born out of, is playing live. I mean, forever in Houston, I was using a 20 space rack with every piece of gear, that you can imagine, playing Brown Eyed Girl in cover bands. So, but I was bound and determined to take that 20 space rack to every gig. So a lot of XTS was born out of that. Self-taught a lot. I had friends teach me not to be afraid of a soldering iron. So, and that went a long way as well.
Can you name some of the most sort of outrageous rig builds that you guys have done?
Yeah, I mean, some of the ones that I really was proud to be a part of that actually took a lot of work. Carrie Underwood was doing a tour in the Round. They really couldn't have pedal boards on top of the stage. So XTS had to create a system to where when they were in, and it was based on fractal units. So for their fractal units, 2 per stringed instrument players, and there was 5 stringed instrument players. So all of them were using fractals. There were 2 fractals per guy, so that there was always a backup for their main fractal and so forth. So they could, if they had a failure live they could swap to the alternative fractal. But while they were in rehearsals, they were able to use the treadle and the foot switches to get all the sounds they needed. A computer took all of that MIDI language and distilled it down to where during the shows they played back all of that MIDI language to each of the rigs so that all of their sounds could be changed without the players having to have the pedal board in front of them. So the musicians could have their instrument and their wireless pack and play the show. And they didn't have to do any treadling or stomping on any buttons or whatever. Now it was risky. I mean, you're counting on computers to feed the MIDI data correctly through the system and so forth. But as far as we were able to ascertain after the fact, they had very little complications during the execution of that tour. So the rigs, and I think they used those rigs for several years, even after like 3 or 4 years, I believe, after we did.
So they had to rehearse the MIDI changes, and then those MIDI changes would be remembered for the live show.
Yes.
That's wild.
Yeah, so the players would had the foot switch in front of them during rehearsals and would hit the button to go from clean to dirty to, add delays, add reverbs, whatever they had to do. And the computer was cataloging all of that MIDI data and would play it back so that during the show, everything they had done in rehearsal was happening in the show. All of the sound changes and the landscape or the soundscape of what was happening, for the music. Started learning how to modify pedals. So as I was doing pedal boards, I'd run across guys that had really horrible sounding pedals. And once guys like Robert Keeley and R.G. Keen had done a lot of modifications, and I think Brian Wampler had written a couple of books on it. I went to look at how could I make these pedals on these boards sound as good as they could sound, and work in conjunction with as a whole. The pedal board work together and sound great. So I learned how to modify pedals, and then at one point it's like I couldn't touch a pedal unless I had modified something in it, which was horrible. I look back at it and I still have pedals here at the shop that I modified, and I go, why in the world did I ever touch that? The modification of the pedals got into my friend Dave Friedman in LA at Rack Systems. He turned me on to this fuzz pedal one time, and a company that did like kits that you could build a pedal. And once I did the first one of those, I go, I can kind of do a whole pedal in the time it takes me to do mods. So I went in and started doing some kit things to get familiar with it. Then I started having boards done, and out of that was born the Precision Overdrive. So that's when I decided that it needed to be a business. I needed to have a license for it. I needed to be able to do business as a company. And so that really started about 2006 when it actually became a live company. But I needed help on the PCBs. I needed help on some of the technical ends. So my friend Dave Phillips at LA Sound Design, he and I have been friends since the early 90s. He turned me on to Barry O'Neill. So I got Barry involved. I got Kingdom Amplifiers was the company at the time. I got them involved in helping me further the Tejas boosts and the Atomic Overdrive. So that's where Barry and I first worked together, and that was 08, 09. And that's when we decided to do XTS, Xact Tone Solutions in Nashville, and open the brick and mortar. Wasn't a great time to start a new business, but it was the right people to start the business. And and when we opened the doors, there were several years where it was a little lean and we heard a lot of crickets. But pretty soon, through working with guys like Jed Hughes and Guthrie Trapp and Ryan Warner and so forth, people started to get the word, and we started to become a lot more busy and so forth. But it started slow, and like everything in Nashville, it's word of mouth. If you're getting gigs, if you're doing anything, guitar repairs or whatever, someone has to refer you for you to really start getting the ball rolling.
So you make pedals at XTS too. A lot of people don't know that, but can you tell me what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, the Precision Overdrive started prior to us having the brick and mortar, and prior to Barry and I working together. And guys in Austin, a lot of guys around Texas gravitated to that. As we started moving through, people would give me ideas. So we did the Pegasus boost, which was based on an old Alembic Stratoblaster a boost. The Atomic Overdrive was a real undertaking. It was getting a pedal that would sound like you had a modified Marshall and or like an Egnator style amp for studio work. It had to feel right, it had to breathe, and it needed to have the gain that you could dial in. And again, I've always loved Steve Lukather and a lot of the sounds he would get, and I was kind of looking for it to get that kind of gain and that feel and so forth. Also, then we took on doing the Winford Drive, and we're sitting here on Winford Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Winford Drive started out with us taking a look at someone's large box rat pedal, an artist's large box rat pedal. We had to figure out what the issues were, and they had specific issues that they told us that it had. Barry designed a presence circuit that would allow note definition to stay consistent throughout, because once you get a rat style pedal, really, a lot of gain going, it just gets really loose and you don't keep the note definition. So the presence helped it keep note definition. And we also added a mid-range control that actually adds not only mids, but gains in the mids. So, all great guitar sounds, all great studio sounds for guitars. Really, the mids have to be right for it to really cut through the mix and so forth. So that mid control on the Winford was amazing. And then we've continued to go in. Our shape charger pedal is like a really good boost, but it has a mid function to where you can add gain and so forth in the mids on that, and it's a really good feeling pedal. You can add some brightness if you need to. It can be like a treble booster. Our Fermata compressor is really cool. It's a compressor that one of the things we wanted to do with the compressor was, it's great that it pops and snaps on the high end, the top end, but once you get to the low end, how do you keep it from getting, again, loose and floppy sounding and all of that? How do you keep that from happening? And we were able to design a pedal that actually, as you started getting into the lower notes, how it still stayed tight and it still compressed right.
It's a freakishly good pedal. I own one and I like it a lot. Really, really smart. And I haven't seen anyone else do that on a compressor yet.
You can get it as loose as you want it to be, but you can also get it to tighten it up. And it was weird to see guys try it for the first time, where they would start on the low E and go all the way up past the 12th fret on the high E, and it just seemed like it was changing feel as they were to get higher in pitch up the fretboard and so forth.
Yeah.
And I got into this because of the gear. My playing is only a vehicle to be able to mess with gear, because I'm an electronics guy, and so the guitar was just a vehicle to have a reason to do something with electronics. That puts me at a serious disadvantage as a musician, but serves us well here. My favorite part is this problem solving thing. As far as the stuff that we've done in the past, favorite builds and stuff are always sort of the collaboration things where you've got multiple departments in a production working together, and it feels like you're pitching in on something that's way bigger than certainly I am myself, or we are even collectively, and then bigger than what everybody who's pitching in on that. So the exciting bit of what we do here is the service stuff, because when everything's done and people are like, this is great, this meets all of our needs, we're so happy, it looks good, it sounds good, you guys were on time, you guys were a huge help to us, like that's the absolute, like that's the goal, is everybody, there's a certain level of satisfaction all around where you feel like this was right, it was done right, it is right, and everybody agrees that this was a good thing. The guitar was the vehicle to get to the gear, and now the gear is a vehicle to be able to serve people well. And I don't know if that's the mark of maturity or boredom, but that's kind of the way that it works now. So like the stuff we did for Taylor Swift, where we made these big A/B switching things so they could take whole fractal systems and hot swap them should one of them crash or something like that. Like that was cool. Building those switchers that was all very gratifying. Another thing about that project is that was one of the first projects where after Eric came on, where like I wasn't like the principal in the building of the thing, because I remember I was on vacation or something like that, and I was like, Eric, hey, it needs to have this, and this, like make these ends. And then I remember coming back from vacation and like all the tails are made and all this stuff, and I was like, well, this is gonna be cool. The Swift stuff was fun for both of those reasons, or gratifying because of those things. You know, the other kind of bucket that's not the technical stuff is sort of the Guitar Hero thing. Like recently Dan Huff was in here and we got to do a board for him, and he's, you know, not a household name as far as, you know, like my wife doesn't know who he is, but all of us do, and everybody in these circles sort of knows who he is. And for me personally, it was a big deal because of, you know, the music that was in my house growing up and all that stuff. So you'll have those things where like, okay, this was a get. That wasn't like some huge rig that was gonna like flush us out for the rest of the year, like monetarily, but it was like, okay, we can't miss the chance to do this. What do we need to do to make this happen? Even though it wasn't super technical, we didn't break any new ground, we didn't invent anything as we do for some of these other things, but it was like, okay, that was cool. Power can be a big, you know, thing, because I think it's sort of the thing that the lay person or sort of the uninitiated doesn't have as firm a grip on. Like, what are milliamps? What are volts? Those sort of things. Like, well, can I take something that the port says 500 milliamps, but the pedal says 100? Am I going to fry the pedal? And like, no, like 500 milliamps is a capacity. You don't want to exceed that, but it just means that your bucket is big enough to serve that pedal. So you're not going to force 500 milliamps into the 100 milliamp pedal, so you don't have to worry about that. The things that we kind of interact with perennially on the rig side is sort of a socio kind of strange thing where when by the time people come here, particularly if they're not professional, like making a living playing music, they will come in with a certain sort of burden of, I'm getting an XTS board made, and this may be the last time that I ever get it done. So I need to make sure that I have every pedal that I've ever had ever in my life on this board. And so the first thing that you kind of have to do is start culling things and be like, okay, this needs to come out. Like if we build you this, it'll be perfect in its execution. Everything will sound great. Nothing will be done less than 110%. And on top of all that, you'll hate it because it's wrong for you and your situation. So helping people kind of realize that and either changing their goals and or just recognizing what they intuitively know. Like, you know, you're not going to use that, you know, auto wah. You don't need that on there. And you're like, yeah, I probably don't need that on there. So it can be little things like that. We're compassionate, but we're dispassionate about the stuff itself. Like, it's your board, you know, you have to use it, I don't have to use it. So you're the user's the final arbiter of what is good. But let us guide you on, hey, this is your 4th ODR flavored drive on here. Do you think you need all 4? Like, could you get away with 1 or 2? Yeah, I probably could. But those are actually really fun. It's one of our favorite things to do here is help people who have no idea. Like, because we've had guys who they've called in and been like, I don't know what I need. Here's a list of songs that I want to be able to play and sound like. I would like your help in getting the pedals and building presets or whatever. If it's something that requires programming, like you do all that stuff for me and then you deliver this thing. That's super cool because now you're giving this guy or gal, a gift that's like everything that they could have wanted, and they had no idea how to verbalize or contextualize what it was that they even wanted. And then you're like, okay, here's everything you wanted. The only thing that really separates us from somebody who does this as a hobby is experience. Like, we solder cables really well. After you do 1,000 ends, we're the same. What you're really getting when you come here is experience, the amount of rigs that we've seen, the amount of pedals that we've seen. So even in the pedals that we're designing and building, it comes from a place that the kind of the separation is the amount of different scenarios that we've used these things and who we're talking to about those things. So like you can come in and tell us, you know, if we start hearing from several guys, like I'm using this pedal, but it doesn't do this thing. Or what I really like about it is this thing. Then we can take that and with our engineering capabilities, translate that into real stuff other than just guitar player gobbledygook. So it's that guiding, chaperoning sort of thing, because we're not building our rigs, we're building other people's rigs. And we want to facilitate what it is that they're doing, not build a million copies of my favorite guitar rig. We've got buddies, and that's kind of their tendency. Like, you don't want to use that pedal, it sucks. You don't have to have that too many times before you start realizing, oh yeah, the client is right. I'm here to help.
Say hi, Eric.
Hi, Eric.
Yes!
Oh, I build pedal boards and solder cables and build boards and put laminate tops on Pedaltrain frames. I accidentally stumbled into a job that combines all of my hobbies into one thing.
In addition to playing guitar.
Which is, yeah, at this point in my life is a hobby. I teched for a long time. Well, I started with a band called Reliant K, and they were great. I had never toured a day before in my life. And the first day I met them up in Columbus, or no, it was in Cleveland? I think it was in Cleveland. So I come up to the bus, I've got my suitcase. I'd never even met any of the guys before. A friend of mine had the gig and he recommended me. So I walked up and the bass player was outside standing there on his phone or something. I said, hey, are you guys from Reliant K? And he said, maybe. Didn't trust me, didn't know me from Adam. So I said, oh, hey, I'm Eric, I'm your new tech. He said, oh, and then he changed his tune quickly. But yeah, I think a big part of what we do is the boards and rigs, they have to work and sound like the player wants, but they also have to last and stand up to the rigors of real world flying, sitting in a trailer. I mean, if it's just going in your car, that's still a thing to contend with. Mm-hmm. It's always been my goal to have as little gear as possible, as few pedals as I can get away with. So the really compact but powerful rigs are always my favorite, I think.
Nice.
Whether it's got a HX stomp or something on it. One thing that can do a bunch and then a couple drives, those are always fun.
So this is the longest YouTube video I've ever done, by far. And when I tried to, edit some clips out to maybe make it a little bit shorter, I just didn't feel good about it because I was leaving out something I thought was important. I wanted to put in as much content about the board and the pedals and get the sounds so we can hear that stuff and see the layout and so forth. But the other part was to really introduce everyone to the folks at XTS if you haven't heard of them, and really show what they can do when building you a custom rig or a custom pedal board. And I'll probably break some of that video up into smaller segments and post them here on the channel so that folks can just watch the drive section or the mod section, whatever they want. But ultimately, this video was about really giving a gift to my friends at Xact Tone Solutions. They've given me great service over the years that I've lived in Nashville, and I can't thank them enough for always making me a priority and making me feel like, regardless who's in the room, they made me feel like I was the most important client at the time, and I think that's priceless. And lastly, thanks so much for just watching. This video took a long time to put together. There were a lot of moving parts, but I hope it helped answer some questions. And if you got pedal board questions, reach out to the XTS folks. They're always happy to help. So I want to go tinker with this new board and get some fun sounds through my rig. Until next time, I'll see you.